include mental health, housing insecurity, and a look at where we go from here as we recover from this time. This series was born out of the State of the Yolo Nonprofit Sector update that the Yolo Community Foundation put together in November, which is still available to view on YouTube if that's of interest. The update drew on a survey to which about 40 of our Yolo nonprofits responded, as well as interviews with about a dozen local executive directors. Well, of course, there were a wide range of community needs that came up in that research, as well as populations that we are very concerned about throughout this time. The topics that we're addressing through this panel were those that just kept coming up in our research from all sorts of angles and all sorts of organizations. And so our goal for this series is to help our community thoroughly understand our local needs, and just better see how our local nonprofits are doing a tremendous job in addressing those needs, and understand the critical role that local donors, volunteers, and other community organizations play in supporting those efforts. So our hope is that this will enable us to come together as a community to support our neighbors in need during this crisis. We're here today, and thanks to our tremendous sponsor, Sutter Health. Without support from Sutter Health, we wouldn't be able to put this series together. Sutter, of course, is deeply involved in the response to this pandemic as a local healthcare organization, and in addition is a major supporter of local nonprofits and a real pillar in our community. I'd like to share a brief statement in Sutter's own words. As a not-for-profit organization themselves, Sutter Health reinvests in the communities we serve through community benefit programs that address priority health needs for underserved and vulnerable populations. Community is at the heart of who we are and what we do. Our work goes beyond traditional healthcare, and we extend support outside the walls of hospitals and care centers, which helps improve the health of the overall community. And I know that our many nonprofit participants today have absolutely seen that work in action. We, Sutter, are thrilled to sponsor the Yolo Community Foundation's COVID-19 Community Needs Series and take part in these important discussions. We look forward to hearing from all the wonderful panelists, many of whom are collaborative partners of ours, and sharing the valuable information learned throughout this series with our organizations. And Sutter, we're tremendously honored for your support and thrilled to be here with you today. And the Yolo Community Foundation is also very excited for the opportunity to support this panel series. For those of you who aren't familiar with us at YCF, our mission is to inspire and support giving and provide philanthropic leadership in our Yolo County. We are founded in 2001, and today we have $7 million in assets across 65 individual funds. In 2020, we made $1.5 million in grants, thanks in large part due to the tremendous support of the community for the Yolo COVID-19 Relief Fund, and we are an affiliate of the Sacramento Region Community Foundation. Our work falls into three pillars. The first is inspiring giving. One big way we do that is by offering philanthropic funds like donor advised funds that make giving easier, tax advantaged, and more effective, as well as by promoting giving through events, media, and other outreach. Secondly, we work to support philanthropists through education to help them be effective in their giving, inspiration to be excited about giving, and a sense of connection to a community of peers working together to serve Yolo County. And we do that through one-on-one staff support, events like site visits, small group discussions, and expert panels like our event today. And then finally, we work to serve nonprofits directly. So we serve nonprofits through our fund holders, but also directly by growing local giving. As fund holders themselves, we offer endowment funds through our grant making initiatives, as well as through professional development programming, primarily through our Nonprofit Leaders Alliance partnership. And then finally, I wanted to share a bit about what we do with our philanthropic funds, which are different types of philanthropic vehicles. So think similar to a financial vehicle like a checking account or a 401k, except focused on supporting your charitable giving. The purpose of these funds is to simplify giving, help you be more effective, and there can also be tax advantages. And fund holders then have access to foundation staff, as well as the community of peers that is working together to have an impact via philanthropy. Our most common fund type is a donor advised fund, which is a lot like a private foundation, but with much lower minimum fund sizes. So if you're interested in learning more about how to collaborate with us as a fund holder, as a nonprofit partner, or otherwise, please don't hesitate to contact me at jessica.hubbard@yolocf.org. And now I'm thrilled to turn it over to Thomas Nelson, our moderator today. Thomas lives at Full Belly Farm in Cape Valley. If you've visited, you know it's a paradise out there. And he has devoted his life to building sustainable food systems that connect rural and urban areas. Through Kitchen Table Advisors, Thomas is thrilled to invest his time in helping small, sustainable farms build their businesses. He is also co-founder of the Cape Valley Farm Shop, which is a community-owned social enterprise that aggregates and distributes local seasonal food from almost 50 family farms in Yolo County. He has provided expertise in coalition building, organizational development, and communications to numerous sustainable agriculture organizations, and he earned his MBA at UC Davis with a focus on social entrepreneurship. Thomas, we're thrilled to have you here today, and thank you so much for moderating. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Jessica. And welcome everybody. This is going to be a great discussion. We have an incredible panel of local leaders who are working deeply on food insecurity in the county. We're going to spend about an hour with questions that I've prepared, and then the remaining half-hour questions that you all have for the group. So please do use that chat box. A little bit of context here. So, you know, throughout COVID-19, throughout this crisis, we've consistently heard that food insecurity is a top need in Yolo County, and really nationwide. You know, and food security, it's not new. Food insecurity was already at high levels before the pandemic. In 2017, according to Feeding America, 28,000 people in our communities here in the county experienced a shortage of food needed to lead an active, healthy life. So while our focus is on food insecurity and on the consumption and distribution of food, we can't overlook that we live in an agriculturally rich area. And, you know, so there's a role for agriculture in all this, and so that's something else we want to explore. You know, I work a lot with small farms and know that, you know, small farms in this community, particularly during COVID, have really stepped up to support feeding their neighbors and helping to feed the community. So, you know, want to draw those connections because this is all linked together into a food system. It has a lot of inequities and injustice in it. But with that, I'm going to introduce the panelists, and yeah, we've got Michael Bish, who is the executive director of the Yolo Food Bank. You know, Michael joined the food bank 3 years ago, bringing a background in business management and nonprofit board leadership. At the food bank, Michael has brought his unique skill set to enable guiding the organization through a really transformative phase, and he's balanced innovation and stability, and brings his passion to serve the community. We also have Alicia Gutierrez, who's the board chair of the Mercy Coalition that's based in West Sacramento. That's a community-based organization that served West Sacramento's homeless population with compassion for over a decade. We're pleased to have Kathy Olson. She grew up on a family farm in Petaluma, so not too far away. She holds a degree in economics from UCD, is a former restaurateur, but she now works as a director of the food services for Winters Joint Unified School District. And then we also have Christy Skibbons. Christy is the executive director of Meals on Wheels for Yolo County. She has been serving in that role for 8 years, but has 30 years of experience working in nonprofit organizations, in education, business, and the arts. And Christy also has a lifelong interest in agriculture, food, and cooking. So we have an incredible group here today. So with that, we're going to dive in. And, you know, let's start with just, if you each could share a little bit, you know, quick overview of your organization and what you do to address food insecurity in Yolo County. And maybe we could start with the order that we've got here. So Michael, why don't you kick us off?
Well, thank you so much for having me and for that kind introduction. Yolo Food Bank is a largish local nonprofit that's primarily philanthropy driven. We distribute about 10 million pounds of food per year throughout the county. It has about a $22 million impact in the county as far as the value of the services that we provide. And like I said, it's throughout the county. So the about 90% of the food that we're distributing is through our own direct distributions at 130 separate distributions around the county. And then around 10% of that total, so about 1 million pounds, is distributed through our nonprofit partners, some of whom are sitting here on the panel with me today, and I'm looking forward to their comments. About 70% of the food that we distribute is food that is recovered from grocery stores, food processors, and the like. About 10% of the food that we distribute is from local growers that you were mentioning just a moment ago, Thomas. And then the remainder is food that we purchase on the open market at wholesale prices, or it's USDA surplus product that's being distributed. So it's very much collaborative effort through our fund donors, our food donors, our volunteers, and our community organizational partners.
Great, thank you, Michael. Alicia?
Hi. Like Thomas said, thank you for the welcome, Thomas. Like Thomas said, I'm with the Mercy Coalition of West Sacramento, and the Mercy Coalition was formed about 10 years ago by local faith leaders and is a community nonprofit with a mission to feed and serve the homeless in West Sacramento. And we started out with our daily lunch program, serving over 1,000 lunches a month from 2013 to March 2020. And we expect to start this program up again soon. In the last few years, we've hosted a rotating winter shelter, which operated 2 seasons before ending last year with the pandemic. We're now providing lunches several times a week to the residents of Project Home Key alongside Yolo County Children's Alliance, where a majority of our unhoused population is sheltering in place at a motel in West Sacramento and receiving social services during the pandemic. Most recently, we're partnering with the Yolo Food Bank to deliver food boxes to residences, and I'll talk more about that later.
Great, and Kathy?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for including me in this discussion today. I'm the Director of Food Service for the Winters School District, and I'm also one of the founding members of Winters Farm to School. Winters Farm to School is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the health and long-term well-being of students in the Winters Joint Unified School District by providing fresh local produce, nuts, and fruits for our school meal programs. However, as our program continued to thrive, there was another serious issue that we wanted to address, and that is hunger. Sadly, 1 in 4 children in Yolo County doesn't have enough food to eat. In our small town, we knew that homelessness was an issue for some of our students. We also knew that for some children, the meals they ate at school were the only meals they ate that day. That's part of the reason we host the weekly Kids Farmers Market at Wagner Elementary School. All of the food provided at the Kids Farmers Market is supplied by the Yolo County Food Bank. Each week, the food bank brings a truck full of fresh fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables, many grown at nearby farms. Winters Farm to School has funded a Kids Farmers Market coordinator position to ensure that the market runs smoothly, that volunteers are in place, and that the markets continue to thrive. The grocery bag full of nutritious food that the children take home every week can mean the difference between being hungry and having enough food to eat. Each summer, the school district also hosts a free meal program for all children 18 and under. When school resumes in the fall, the younger siblings of school-age children are no longer entitled to these meals. Winters Farm to School pays for these meals when the summer program ends.
Great, thanks, Kathy. And Christy?
Thank you, Thomas. First, I'd like to thank the Yolo Community Foundation and Sutter Health for making today possible and having all 5 of these conversations. It's really awesome. Meals on Wheels Yolo County delivers 5 fully prepared nutritious meals to about 400 Yolo County seniors age 60 plus each week. Meals are prepared from scratch here at our main kitchen in Woodland and transported to satellite locations in West Sacramento, Davis, and Winters. Staff, site managers, and kitchen volunteers package the meals for delivery by delivery volunteers to the homes of homebound seniors in the 4 cities and also to Esparto, Knights Landing, and other rural areas in the North County. Before COVID, we delivered 5 hot and ready-to-eat meals to each client daily. Currently, we deliver 3 hot meals, 1 frozen meal and 1 fresh meal. So same number of meals, just kind of in different formula there. We also provide meals for all holidays. Our program is closed, 10 a year. In the fall each year, we provide a week's worth of shelf-stable emergency meals to each client in case of seasonal flooding, public safety power shutoff, or as just happened on February 7th, an extended loss of power at our main kitchen. Our weekend food project is a delivery of groceries for the last weekend of each month to about 150 of our most needy clients. At the end of the month, they often have more month left than money, and we don't deliver meals on the weekends. So this bag of food covers the 6 meals of the last weekend of the month, plus some extra to hold them over until their Social Security payment arrives around the 1st of the month. In addition to food, our delivery volunteers have a short chat with our clients and have been trained to watch for signs that something might not be right with their health. For instance, slurred speech, comprehension difficulties, etc. We have protocols in place for reporting on and acting on these types of situations. Our social workers check in with each client 4 times a year, 2 in person and 2 by phone. Of course, during COVID, they've all been by phone. They have a series of questions to ask, but also engage the folks in conversation in order to really understand how they're doing. We can often make referrals to other sorts of help, for instance, senior legal help or senior transportation. We also help in getting information to our clients as homebound seniors age 60 plus aren't a big part of the internet generation. For instance, we helped folks get information on participating in the census, and we've been busy during the past year helping them understand everything COVID related. Most recently and currently, we are connecting them with vaccination information. So in conclusion, addressing the food insecurity of seniors also leads us to meeting other needs for them as well.
That's great. Thank you, Christy. You know, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, together, your organizations are serving a sizable, population here in the county. And I'm wondering if you can each just take, briefly, just like think. I mean, all of the people you're serving experience food insecurity, but thinking about those who, if you can just give us more of a sense of like, who's got the highest need, just so we have a real understanding of, who these people are that we're serving in the community. And we could go in the same order there, Michael, starting off.
Well, I think the attendees will be pretty surprised. I mean, the number is significant. So at the food bank, either directly or through partners such as my fellow panelists here, we're feeding about 60,000 individuals every single month. So yeah, some of those are duplicated, but it's, even when you whittle that down, it's a very large number. Something on the order of 1/3, perhaps more, of the families in Yolo County are food insecure, according to a recent Brookings Institute study. So it's not a trivial matter. It's a huge number, and the subgroups within that large group, I would say, are undocumented workers, children, as Kathleen mentioned, students, seniors, and struggling families. I would also add, of course, the unsheltered residents.
And our numbers kind of roll up into Michael's. So our focus is on the unsheltered and homeless adults in particular. We're currently serving about 100 homeless adults, and they've ranged from 18 years of age to 94. And we've recently expanded services to deliver the food boxes provided by the Yolo Food Bank to include 100 low-income individuals that are housed in the community. And most of these are the homebound seniors that can't make it or should not go to the community food distribution events that are offered by the the food bank and other organizations. So so we are, we represent a small portion, and we're looking to increase, but there's a lot of will, I think, locally to further our reach. And one of the things that I think saw during the pandemic was that people were receiving duplicates, like they're being served by multiple organizations, which is a great thing. But I think one of the challenges is how do we kind of expand the reach and make sure that those duplication of services expand beyond the current families and individuals we're serving.
Kathy?
Yes. Serving school children right now, the meal program we're running may be part of the single largest emergency feeding program in US history. The population of Winters is around 7,200, and we're currently serving 6,500 meals a week to school children, or it's actually to all children 18 and under in Winters. Winters Farm to School is providing support for the current emergency feeding program, and the meals we are providing are enabling families to stretch their food dollars, feed their children, and we are discovering in many situations, helping them to remain in their housing.
So for Meals on Wheels, of course, we serve only seniors, 60 plus, about 400 at this point, but over a year's time, many people go on and off the program for various reasons. So usually it ends up to be somewhat just over 1,000 over a year's time. Pre-COVID, about 2/3 of our clients were homebound and 1/3 ate lunch at each city's senior center. So with the closure of the senior centers, we also home deliver meals to those who ate at those congregate sites previously. But as far as a priority, are folks who are unable to drive or to somewhat easily obtain food or to prepare food in other ways are our very highest priority. We also prioritize those seniors who have recently been hospitalized, as regular and consistent nutritious meals are vital to those who are healing. Priority is given to those clients having no one living at home with them, and or those who have no relatives or friends nearby who can check in on them, do their grocery shopping, take them to the doctor, and so on. When folks have many physical and medical issues and are on many medications, they are also a priority. And finally, those that have indicated to us that they don't always have enough money to buy the food they need, and or they eat fewer than 2 meals a day, are also prioritized.
Got it. Thanks for sharing all that. I mean, that's one thing about food insecurity is it's dynamic, right? I mean, a family that's facing food insecurity today might have, circumstances can change. So it's interesting to note, right, that there's a much greater population that's served over the course of a year. COVID has obviously exacerbated a problem that existed before COVID, hit us as a community. And, so food insecurity has been a significant challenge for Yolo County. But how has the pandemic changed that, and to what extent has the pandemic actually increased the need, versus increasing awareness of what was already an existing need? And Alicia, I'm going to target this question to you first, and then Michael, I'd love to hear your thoughts after that.
Sure. And I think, Thomas, you mentioned earlier the irony that we live in this fertile agricultural county of Yolo and still struggle with food insecurity. So like you said, the pandemic exacerbated access to food, even for families and individuals who've had the means in the past to purchase food, or currently do, but especially for those who are already dealing with food insecurity. The pandemic brought on panic buying, emptying shelves of common staples like flour and rice. Everybody wanted to become a baker when we started sheltering in place, and this drove up prices for commodities that our neighbors count on to provide food and meals on the table. On top of that, many nonprofits, including the Mercy Coalition, have volunteer bases that were deemed in the high-risk group for COVID. So it made it unsafe for many of our volunteers to continue serving the most vulnerable in our community. So it was like a double whammy. We had to shut down our daily lunch program and winter warming centers early in March 2020. And wait for the all clear to resume services that had to be completely redesigned to minimize risk of transmission. But the response in Yolo County, I feel, was tremendous, largely thanks to our county and our wonderful Yolo Food Bank, others like Yolo Community Foundation, that really look to bolster nonprofits and help us kind of regroup and redesign how we're going to deliver services. The Yolo Food Bank, I'm not going to steal Michael's thunder, but I feel like they quickly operationalized to deliver food boxes, creating a venue for community members, even those of us that are tagged to other nonprofits to serve. The members that we had, volunteers, found their way into the Yolo Food Bank to help with that program, which was rolled out very quickly and was wildly successful, if you ask me. So I'll let Michael tell you more about that and Yolo Food Bank response.
Well, thank you for that plug, Alicia. So going back a number of years, there were studies indicating that the need as far as food insecurity, only about 50% of that was being met in Yolo County. There was a Valley Vision study, I think from 2016, that made that pretty clear. And so that's no different than any other social service that's being provided in Yolo County. Across the spectrum, less than 50% of the need was being met prior to the pandemic. So whether it's homeless services or mental health services, what have you, less than 50% of the need was being met in any one of those categories. And so Yolo Food Bank, knowing that, made a concerted effort to dramatically increase its capacity in all respects in order to start reducing that 50% unmet need. And we were actively doing that in particular the year before the pandemic hit. So we had increased the amount of food that we were distributing by 50% before the pandemic hit. And then of course the pandemic hit, and anecdotal evidence seems to indicate that the food insecurity increased another maybe 25%. So based on Medi-Cal enrollment, CalFresh enrollment, we have reason to believe that the pandemic created 25% additional food insecurity. There's also been a benefit to the pandemic, and don't crucify me for saying something a little bit crazy here, but the benefit of the pandemic, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement, is it's really shown the spotlight on all of these disparities that we have going on in our community. And like Alicia mentioned, it really mobilized the community. So that, funders, food donors, volunteers, man, they were really activated by what they saw every night on the evening news or in their social media feeds. So the resources that we now have at our disposal are far greater than they were before the pandemic. And as a consequence, we now have much greater capacity and capabilities to deal with food insecurity currently in Yolo County as never before.
That's fascinating. I mean, you were already building capacity to serve a gap, and in a silver lining, if you will, right? It's actually accelerated the pace of continuing to build that capacity. That's interesting. And it kind of leads into the next question, which I want to address to Christy and Kathy. As we're emerging from the pandemic, what do you expect the impact will be on the levels of food insecurity in the communities that you serve?
Which
Shall I
one?
start? Oh, go ahead, Christy.
Okay. So first of all, let me just say that the past year has turned up so many things that we did not ever expect in our lifetimes, that I hesitate to theorize about what may happen during the next year as we come out of the pandemic. However, we have given it some thought. With what we know about our clients, and additionally with what we've learned over the past year, we know that we had an increase, excuse me, of over 30% in the numbers of clients that we serve this year. The clients who came on the program because they're support people, usually adult children, were no longer able to travel due to stay-at-home orders, or they feared exposing their elderly parents to the virus, may not need our services any longer as vaccines become available on a wider basis. Many clients who were nervous about going outside their homes at all due to the media coverage of the elderly being in the most dangerous group will begin to venture out again into their neighborhoods, maybe a walk to the store and that sort of thing, which is great. They may cut back on the number of meals per week with us. They don't have to have them every day. On the flip side, we also know that many who came onto Meals on Wheels during COVID were already on the cusp of needing our services anyway. So we're expecting that most of those folks will probably stay with us. And one final thing in relation to that, before COVID, we were already being hit very hard with the sheer numbers of baby boomers who are turning 60 and now eligible for our services. We're in the middle of those years that had over 4 million babies being born every year who are now in their 60s. That has never stopped due to the pandemic. And so we have about another 4 years of boomers coming of age at a super high rate, in addition to those we already serve. And the pandemic has accelerated that in a really interesting way for us.
Well, the pandemic has been upending our lives for more than 1 year, presenting us with a never-ending series of unexpected new challenges. And like Michael, I see a bit of a positive side to what are also some new opportunities. The meals we are currently providing have provided a critical safety net for hungry children and the greater community that struggled to cope with the fear, anxiety, and boredom of the sudden lockdowns, social isolation, and limited food service opportunities. Grateful families woke up to what cafeteria teams have meant to school children for generations. Food insecurity was here prior to the pandemic. It has also brought attention to the fruits and vegetables being provided by Winners Farm to school, especially to the children from food insecure households. I don't really see, I would love to see a change in that, but I don't see a change in that. What it has done for us, it's brought new awareness in accessibility. And we know that there's accessibility in this rural county to even get the meals that we have available for families.
So thinking about income inequality and racial equity, and the impact that has on food insecurity in Yolo County, how are you seeing those kind of linked to food insecurity? Alicia, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and then Christy.
Yeah, I'm afraid I might go off on a tangent on this one. So rein me in if you need to. But I mean, we talked about how the pandemic exacerbated food insecurity across the county, but particularly for our very low income and unhoused populations. In-person services were put on hold for several months, and the pandemic brought racial equity and income inequality issues to a head. We saw working families lose jobs, and even those fortunate enough to keep their jobs now had to figure out childcare and virtual schooling arrangements for their children. And then I have anecdotal information on this, but in many forums I've heard that child abuse reporting is down, not because it's not happening, but because the largest group of mandated reporters can assess their students like they normally would in in-person instruction. So same, I feel like it's all kind of the same vein. I understand that many of our students rely on free school lunches for a consistent daily meal, and sometimes that is the only consistent daily meal that they have access to. And our Yolo Food Bank is addressing this by working with so many of the partners to make food boxes available for students and families at the local elementary schools, through weekly local food distribution events, through partner organizations. So we have this network, fortunately, that that is reaching. But I feel like there are just these kind of broader systemic issues that the pandemic kind of brought into the spotlight, and food insecurity. Actually, this whole series I feel like is on topics that are all kind of symptomatic of the pandemic, the racial equity and income inequality issues that have always existed, but are now just amplified because people that were struggling before are struggling even more now, and even people that were on solid footing before are struggling now with things like food insecurity.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Alicia, very much so. Our program is kind of unique in terms of this question in relation to COVID, because we have no financial means test for seniors to receive our services. Meals are free of charge, although some clients make a voluntary contribution for their meals. And because we serve only seniors, they're no longer working, so they didn't bring in less money during COVID, or they didn't lose their jobs during the pandemic, unlike the folks that all three of you serve. Our program also never discriminates on the basis of race, and so nothing has changed there either in relation to that during COVID. But the perspective of our clients during the pandemic has been that they are the group at the most extreme risk of contracting the disease, getting the sickest, and dying from it. This has isolated an already extremely isolated homebound population, which is a huge problem for our homebound folks, and it always has been, and it's been even worse during COVID. The price for venturing out from their home or letting someone in could literally be death. So the inequality for them has been one of age and physical frailty instead of the other issues.
Yeah, that's interesting to note. And Michael and Kathy, I'm just curious if you have more that you want to add on, before we move on from this topic.
I'll tag on to what Alicia was saying. These certain groups have borne the brunt of the pandemic, and I think the resources that have been mobilized to address the pounding that they're taking just have not been fairly allocated. So there's folks that are their wealth is dramatically increasing, while this huge swath of our community is just getting hammered. It's not right.
Anything to add there, Kathy?
No, I agree. The inequality is very obvious. And I found it really interesting in a local community forum when we did discuss last week that all the support that everyone is providing for families in terms of food has had such an impact that it's actually, they believe, allowing some families to remain in their housing, because money they would have to spend on food they haven't had to spend, and they've been able to make rent. It's a big impact.
Yeah, it's kind of all tied together, isn't it? When you're thinking about tight household budgets, and a lot of the structural challenges that really shape those budgets for families. Well, we're going to turn a little bit back to the agriculture. We are an ag-rich county and a major food-producing region. And, so to what extent does that enable you to fight against hunger more effectively? And how is the local ag industry involved in your work? Kathy, you've been running this farm to school program in Winters, which is, I think you've won state state, if not national awards for. Maybe you could kick us off on that topic.
Okay, well, we are so fortunate to be located in the heart of this rich agricultural area, no doubt, and it has benefited the food program immensely. Certainly with the quality of the food we're able to provide families. What I have liked about being able to provide food to families, one of the things we noticed right away during the beginning of the pandemic is suddenly we're having to package meals instead of having all these great salad bars at schools. And we're buying things like, those little bagged carrots and apples to pass out, which are out of season. And it really upset me. And I was trying to decide what to do. And I realized, wow, these families are taking this food home. We can give them whole heads of lettuce. We can pass out bunches of carrots and baskets of strawberries. And it really changed our farm to school model. And that's what we started handing families. And the good part is that it also educated families and parents about what is being harvested locally and brought them into the food system. Farmers also had a big impact. They started donating produce because they lost some of their markets. We had one farmer who had a large distribution to a B&B in San Francisco who no longer needed their produce and told they had $5,000 prepaid. They said, keep the money. We know you're struggling. Just give the money or give the produce to someone who can use it, and in turn gave us that produce to distribute to kids, which really helped carry us through a month. I think it's brought awareness to the work we've been doing with farms and farmers. I feel like it's brought that community together even better. I love that when we have the food distribution lines set up and families are driving by to pick up their food, they also see the local trucks from, different farms in the county, from Full Belly, from Terra Firma, and the Sparks Oranges, unloading their produce that they're turning around and putting in their cars to take home, as well as the wonderful Farm to Families boxes that the Yolo Food Bank is distributing to us. They have made a big difference for families.
So some of those relationships, having those relationships already in place going into the pandemic, it sounds like helped to make for a more robust response.
It did an immediate response. It was great.
And Michael, you said 10% of your food is sourced from local farms.
That's right. So we are absolutely blessed here in Yolo County with incredibly generous local growers, processors, distributors, and seed companies who are absolutely vital to the work that we're all performing here in Yolo County as far as addressing food insecurity. And I should also mention the community harvest organizations that, particularly during the winter when there's not much being locally grown, the community harvest organizations are running around the various communities here in Yolo County and harvesting citrus and persimmons and other items to help fill that winter and spring gap here. I do, if you'll indulge me for a moment, I would like to circle back to a comment that Kathy made to the previous question, which I think really needs to be stressed here. The work that we're doing has a manifold impact on the community. So yes, we are filling bellies, right? There's hungry people and we are providing desperately needed food so that they can meet their nutritional needs. But we are also having a poverty impact. So we are reducing the financial pressure on the families that we're serving, and that we're saving them $200, maybe $500 a month on their grocery bill, and then they can redeploy those funds to pay rent, pay for gasoline to get to work, or pay for childcare, or medication, whatever needs that they're having trouble meeting. And so that's a huge impact that I don't think most residents here in Yolo County are fully recognized. And then the third, in the case of Yolo Food Bank, is we're supporting the missions of these 80 plus nonprofits that are availing themselves of the food from the food bank. Many of these nonprofits, addressing food insecurity is not their primary mission, right? They have some other kind of mission. And the food that they're providing is either an ancillary service, or it's kind of a lure to attract, that doesn't sound right. It attracts the clientele so that they can provide other types of service like mental health counseling or diagnosing, perhaps questionable family practices going on in their households and things like that. And so, the work that we're all doing here is really having quite an impact in the county.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a re-emerging or, a consistent theme here is that it's all tied together, right? You can't just think of food insecurity in isolation when you're thinking about community needs.
Yep.
Christy, you have a passion for farming, so I'm just curious if you have more that you would want to share on this topic.
Well, I don't have anything prepared because my name wasn't on this one, but I do. And we are really blessed to have a relationship with Center for Land-Based Learning. And we are in our, I think, 6th year of being the great and wonderful beneficiaries of some really great things that all of their students in the program are growing for us. And now they are located just down the street rather than out in Winters. And so that's great. So a shout out to Mary and all the crew over there, because our folks just love when we get all the fresh tomatoes and fresh everything, squash and cucumbers, and we utilize it a lot. So that's really awesome for us to do that. We also sometimes receive donations from other local farms, from rice producers and things like that. And it is always incorporated. Davis Food Co-op just gave us a donation, and we're working on a couple others with other folks. And all of those things are incorporated. We do all of our own cooking here from scratch. So all those things are really important. And I'll never forget, I'd only been on the job for about a year, and it was summer, and somebody gave us some wonderful tomatoes. They'd just been harvested the evening before. And I was out at one of the sites, and we didn't have time to use them in anything. So we just sliced them all up, and this one woman took all these slices, and I was sitting next to her, and she put salt and pepper all over the top of them, and she was just eating them, just cutting them up and eating them. And there was tomato juice going down her chin, and she was just in heaven. It was just great. And so that's what we're shooting for here when we can get those kinds of things donated to our program.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And thanks for lifting up Center for Land-Based Learning. They do great work.
Mm-hmm.
So this question's to all of you. So, if you could just, you've talked a lot about what your organizations are doing, but if you could highlight just one thing that your organization is doing to address, food insecurity challenges that we're discussing here, like, what's one thing that you feel your organization is having a really strong positive impact on food insecurity in Yolo County? And maybe, Christy, we could start with you.
Okay, well, I think that like others have said before me, there were a lot of downsides during COVID, and a lot of sleepless nights and tough days and weeks and months. And but there were other things that were positive that we've learned. And we here think that during COVID, we've strengthened our infrastructure, and we've improved our thinking outside the box in order to serve our clients at all and in order to serve them better. We added another social worker on staff. We've improved the protocols for adding new clients and for checking in with the current clients quarterly, even though it's been harder because we're not actually in their home as we usually are, and because we have to keep everybody safe. We developed a frozen meal program for clients who are not physically able to accept their meal at the door due to COVID restrictions. For instance, they're bedbound and they didn't have anyone to take the meal at the door. We now provide a TV table free of charge to clients if they need it, for our volunteers to set their meal on during the COVID no contact delivery. We had to keep our volunteers safe as well as the clients. We've been experimenting with some new recipes and some new ways of packaging meals. And we've always been an organization that is continually meeting and conquering new challenges, but COVID has been the biggest test of that ability. And we feel that we're better because we've learned better how to do that in a big way. Our current clients and future clients will reap the benefits, we think.
Wow, yeah, that's super impressive. Alicia, why don't you go next?
This one was hard for me. So I think I like Christy's response. I feel like COVID forced a lot of organizations like the Mercy Coalition, but I know it's far-reaching, to kind of reimagine how we deliver services. And we were able to do that, not as quickly as others maybe, but I think the one thing I feel like that is going phenomenally well is our partnership with the Yolo Food Bank. It's allowing us to expand our reach, our organization's reach, where we were formerly focused on providing meals and making sure our unhoused population was fed. We're now kind of an extension of the food box delivery for them and reaching some of the shut-in seniors. So I feel like that through this partnership, we've been able to successfully kind of expand our reach and serve more individuals and not just unhoused, but the very low income that might not have access to some of the other offerings around.
Yeah, it was interesting. We often think about hard infrastructure, but I think what you're pointing to, Alicia, is like the soft infrastructure, like those relationships, right? In the partnership with Yolo Food Bank become critical in times of exacerbated need.
Yes.
Kathy, how about you in your organization?
I believe it's brought a heightened awareness to food insecurity in winters. It's something that people have been hearing me speak about for many years, but when the local community saw 3 or 4 blocks of cars lined up for our first meal distribution, before we quite had it organized to move cars quickly through the line, I thought it brought awareness. And I believe this awareness will help the community to focus on food insecurity. It was here before the pandemic, and I believe it will be here as we move forward. The thing that I learned that I think is going to help us the most is access. I have learned that access is an issue. Even in this rich agricultural area, it is the key struggle. And we are providing support for meals, and many who couldn't access those meals. One of the things I learned right away, I started thinking about the kids who were the first to be in line for school breakfast every day, because I knew they had not eaten since they left school the day before. And when I didn't see them accessing the meals we were distributing, it worried me. And I worried, what were they doing for food at home? And we started making phone calls. And, we found out there was either transportation issues or the only parent around was at work. And we started delivering meals to a few families. And we went from delivering meals to a few households to where we have a school food service program, now delivering meals to 200 households twice a week. That's a big undertaking for a school district. And we could not have done that without the support of Winners Farm to School. What I am hoping is going forward, when this ends and we return to a non-pandemic style meal service, these kids are still going to be there hungry. How can we continue this moving forward? And I'm hoping that's the impact we can have.
Michael?
Yeah, in my view, the single most impactful thing that the community can do is fully implement and fully fund Senate Bill 1383 edible food recovery mandates. There's nothing more critical than taking advantage of this tremendous once in a lifetime opportunity so that we can address all of these underlying issues that we've been talking about for the last hour here. So what that bill requires is that we stop sending 14 million pounds of surplus food, perfectly edible surplus food, to the landfill simply because we have no place to store it. So instead of feeding people, we're feeding the landfill with 14 million pounds of food. That's totally unnecessary. We could be recovering all of that and distributing it to folks. And of course, with the funding that comes with that recovery effort, we can overcome many of these barriers that Kathy and the other panelists have have been talking about. And so that's where Yolo Food Bank has been focusing its efforts, apart from the pandemic response. That is where we've been investing a massive amount of effort over the last almost 2 years now, and we're already witnessing the fruits. So we've tripled our edible food recovery from these so-called tier 1 generators, but there's still another 7 million pounds that can be rescued or recovered and go to meet these unmet needs. And so we really need to get on this as a community around the county.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear from each of you. I mean, together it just sounds like an incredible amount of innovation and adaptation, but also like really, it's also honed in on even further where the gaps are and creative ways to address that through legislation and otherwise. This all just highlights the importance of having community-based organizations that can respond to community needs. But so we've got a couple of great questions that are coming through on chat. Just a reminder to all the participants here, if you have a question, please do put it in the chat so we can get the panelists' take on them. The last question that I have prepared here is for each of you. What do you hope we'll learn from the pandemic, and what are we going to do differently as we move forward from the crisis? And let's go in that same order we went before. So, Christy.
So, I think on the downside, the things that we can all learn, including our organization, our staff was shocked that there was no general infrastructure or plans of any kind from anybody to help us to help our clients. As a nonprofit with already lean staffing and lean money and everything, it's been pretty much 100% up to us every step of the way to adapt, pivot, and reinvent to meet every need and every new government requirement, which have changed very often. I'm not calling out anybody in particular, so no, I don't mean that. And it was us too. It's just like earthquake preparation. We never have time to do that. We never have time to rebuild bridges that are falling down. We always kick the can down the road. And I think that was very evident during the pandemic. The constant changes, sometimes literally overnight, due to a lack of any kind of emergency plans, were the most difficult part of this pandemic for us. And we're talking about federal all the way down. We as an organization have learned many things from this pandemic, and we're really hopeful that other organizations and agencies and governments will also, and somehow we can work together moving forward during the more stable times to be more prepared for whatever the next emergency is, because there always is a next emergency, and we should have at least some basic structure. On the upside, we've been so surprised and so delighted at the support that we've received from our community. When the initial information that those over age 65 were at greatest risk, many of our volunteers had to stop delivering meals in order to keep themselves safe. And we were worried about how we were going to get food out to our folks. But many people were also suddenly home with nothing to do because they were laid off or they lost their job. Many people called us up. We were inundated with new volunteers wanting to help, which was just so gratifying. Our staff has been amazing through some very difficult times. We're stronger for this. Local donors, individual, corporate, governmental, have been financially generous, and it has made all the difference in our ability to source food when our supply chain during COVID hasn't been very dependable, to hire extra help and to provide more food and even treats to our folks who are so lonely. We've relearned that people are inherently good and they want to help, and that both individuals and businesses can act quickly, decisively, and with compassion and generosity in order to help those in need. And those have been wonderful things to remember.
Thanks for sharing all that. Yeah. Alicia?
So I kind of have three things. So one thing that I feel like we've learned is we have the food, we have the volunteers, and the heart of the communities to serve these populations. What I think we need and want more of is the systems for coordinating, making sure that our reach is as broad as possible, and that we can quickly redistribute food that's being collected. To my second point, I really hope that we can all come together to support the Yolo Food Bank and its innovative food rescue efforts. So Michael mentioned SB 1383, and I mean, there's just this glut of food that's going to waste that could be used to feed our community and really go a long way to maybe even resolve the food insecurity issues that we have in our region. And then something that I've personally learned, and I feel like it's going to be something that we're dealing with in all of this service delivery going forward for these populations in particular, is just the value of the human interaction. Right now, all of us have, for good reason, gone to contactless delivery, and really the human interaction is limited. And I think about the impact to these populations, the isolated and homebound seniors in particular. And Christy, your comments earlier kind of punched me in the gut, but I really think we need to plan for how we're going to do that safely, like start to bring people back into the fold and build up the human interaction in our service delivery when it's safe to do so.
Thank you. And Kathy?
Well, I am hoping the community does not lose focus on food insecurity and the help their neighbors may need. I am also hoping that children may continue to have access to local farm direct fruits and vegetables, not just in the school meals. And I am also hoping that everyone does not lose sight on the importance of farm to school programs and how they impact schools, the community, and the health and well-being of our children.
Thank you. Yeah, Michael.
For me, I think the biggest learning lesson of the pandemic is that despite the fact that we doubled, perhaps tripled the amount of food that we're distributing around the county, all of us collectively here, what have we really changed at the end of the day? It feels like we're putting field dressings on these gaping battle wounds. That sounds a little gory, but that's what life looks like for us here. That the systems at play here are creating poverty and food insecurity faster than we can alleviate it. And so we really need it's clearer than ever that systemic change is necessary. We need to change the local food system. We need to reform housing. We need to reform taxation. We need to reform the labor markets and how we value labor. Until that happens, it's like a fire drill. That all needs to change. We need to start thinking much, much bigger. We need to dream bigger. We need to focus on outcomes, on impacts. We need to drive change to the whole system. We're the wealthiest nation on the face of the earth. Why do we even have poverty? I don't even understand how we can have poverty, given the resources that we have.
Yeah, there's definitely threads and what themes that I think are emerging from what you're all talking about, and it sounds like a need for greater coordination, right? And that structure is kind of missing at this point, although it's obviously happening, like at an informal level. But anyway, yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I'm going to jump into the questions because we've got a number of really good ones popping up, and we are going to start with the first question that popped up was from my colleague Noelle, who is asking, what kind of support do each of your organizations need most to continue your critical work? And this is kind of popcorn, so whoever wants to jump in with a response.
For us, it's money. I mean, I think that's probably somewhat true of everybody. I mean, we can only do what we can afford to do and what the volunteers and supporters help us to do.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that, Kathleen. I agree. And I hate that the answer always seems to be money. But the financial generosity to our organization during the pandemic made it so much easier to meet challenges head on. I've worked in nonprofit organizations my whole career, and enough money is always the #1 barrier to getting done what needs to be done. We had so many hurdles this past year. We were blessed that we could spend our energy and our brain power and time on how to meet every new challenge and figure out the best and the most workable solution without spending every minute on worrying about where every single was going to come from in order to do that. So I would agree with you on that.
I'll jump on that bandwagon. So for a lot of our organizations, I think the more conventional, traditional forms of fundraising, event type things were halted completely by the pandemic. A lot of those events were canceled, and we had to rely on direct asks and grants and things like that. So we are really grateful for the Yolo Community Foundation. We have funding from Dignity Health. We have funding from our city. And I feel like funding for nonprofits, that's always gonna be something we're looking for more of to kind of continue our mission, expand our mission and reach. But I think we have a really good system in, and the response in Yolo County was really solid with the pandemic. And I feel like we just need to dust that system off. I'm thinking of the food box delivery and figure out if we can, with the local partnerships, bring that up to where it was operating at the beginning of the pandemic.
Well, it sounds like I'm the outlier here. You guys are ganging up on me. I have a slightly different take on this question. I think the single greatest thing that Yolo Food Bank needs is willing, world-changing, nonprofit, governmental, educational, corporate, and philanthropic partners. Thomas alluded to this. It's the partnerships, it's the collaborations, is what's going to defeat poverty and food insecurity. We need to go out and inspire. We need to show leadership, and the funding will follow.
Yeah, well, this next question does dovetail on that, idea of collaboration. Jessica's asking, can you share a bit about the importance of collaboration in your field, and what other cause areas, outside of food insecurity, could learn from, your work about collaboration? Michael, since you kind of brought up collaboration, you want to take that first?
Sure. So when I introduced myself, I said we're providing $22 million worth of services to the county in the current fiscal year. Not a single dollar of that service would happen without our partnerships. There is nothing that that Yolo Food Bank does on its own. Everything is done in collaboration. The food is being donated. The volunteers are providing their time. The funders are providing their precious dollars. The others are hosting our distribution, are hosting our distributions. Our 80+ nonprofit partners are working in collaboration with us. I can't think of a more collaborative service that's being provided out there than the work that we're collectively doing with one another.
Yeah, and Alicia, you touched on your deep collaboration with Yolo Food Bank. Any other thoughts to share there?
Yeah, and because we serve the unhoused, I feel like you know, housing is another cause area, and maybe mental health. Like, so I feel like our population in particular is struggling with multiple areas that kind of transcend food insecurity. It's income, it's housing, it's mental health sometimes, maybe just health more broadly. But we also rely on partnerships, like for example, with the Yolo County Children's Alliance and city, county, the County Health and Human Services to make sure service delivery is comprehensive. And where our organization might specialize in food delivery, and that's what we're good at, we recognize where other organizations might specialize in social services delivery or mental health services. There's a lot of specialization. So I think to the second part of the question, what other causes could learn from food insecurity nonprofits about collaboration? It's just recognizing what our organizations are good at and figuring how we fit into the big picture. So, you know, our clients and our program participants are who we want to serve, and how we best serve them might be through, you know, partnering and collaborating with other organizations that can meet their varied needs.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned the big picture, and it also sounded like that's a gap right now, you know, or it's a need in this space. Is like how do you knit together all the different efforts of the groups and kind of identify gaps and, you know, and how you can serve the community better. I mean, and I'm just going to seed it, but you know, if a food policy council, if any of you have worked with those, and if you see that as a potential tool, but I'm going to move us forward to another question this one's from Catherine, and she's asking what challenges you anticipate coming out of the pandemic, and maybe this is beyond money. You know, what are the challenges that you see coming out of the pandemic?
I'll take a whack at that. The food bank currently is about to launch a new effort, which is to kind of retool all of our services. I think all too often in the nonprofit sector, we think we design our programs and our services around what we think the client's needs are. And we need to reverse that. We need to work to put ourselves in their position and think about the challenges that they're confronted with from their perspective, and then deliver those services the way they want them delivered. And when we do that, we can reduce a lot of the barriers that we've been talking about here today. So, you know, whether it's, you know, distance barriers or, you know, whatever the social stigma type barriers, we can reduce many of those barriers if we take that type of approach. And so Yolo Food Bank over the next months is going to be investing an extraordinary amount of resources to try and successfully pull off that pivot.
Other thoughts on challenges?
I'd like to kind of piggyback on what Kathleen said before about, I just worry that, you know, as we all get our vaccinations and we get to go on vacation and we get to see people and do things we didn't get to do for a long time, that we're going to forget about this. We're going to forget about the food insecurity, the homelessness, and everything that's been happening. And I think that it'll just fade in the background. And I would really like to work to not make that happen. And putting that together kind of with the collaboration question, I think it's great that all of us collaborate with each other and with many other nonprofits, but it's really tough when you're collaborating with other nonprofits, because in a way we're all in the same boat. We all are lean on staff, we're all lean on finances, and there should be more of a cohesiveness, in my opinion, that it's different sorts of organizations that collaborate together, not just all of us with each other. We already know what we're doing and what we can do, because then something happens like a global pandemic and we're kind of all on the same Titanic here, that we are all, you know, we're in the high waters and hitting the iceberg and all of that together. And it's really shown me that because of all the collaboration we got from local businesses and families and all kinds of organizations through this past year, that's what really helped us the most. So I'm hoping to hang on to some of that and utilize that going forward.
Yeah, that's great to punctuate. Yeah, the need for diverse relationships, right? And it's not just about food. It's like it's tied into all these other issues. You know, Brett has a question about you guys. A lot of you talked about innovation, right? Things that you did to innovate through the crisis. You know, what did you learn? You know, what were key things that you learned, or is there anything you want to share with counterparts in other counties? Things that you think worked exceptionally well.
I think meal distribution with school districts delivering meals to children who can't access food has been an eye-opener for me. And what I worry about is, even though we have great partnerships and collaboration with others, that it's not just in Winters, but Yolo County and even further nationally, that we have children who are at home hungry and that we have not figured out how to get them meals on weekends and into their homes. So I think for me, it's identified a greater problem that may take more than our county, but perhaps there is a partnership that we can develop countywide to help all children in Yolo County who struggle to access food.
Any other key lessons learned?
I'm hoping Michael will talk about the response with the food box delivery. I feel like that model and the speed at which they rolled that response out is one that makes a great case study and should be kind of championed all over the place. But Michael, I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, thanks for teeing that up for me, Alicia. So actually, my reaction to the question is, what can other counties and communities learn from us, and how we, and I say we collectively, how we as a community responded to the need out there. I don't think any county in the state responded as successfully and as quickly as we did to the need. We immediately identified that seniors and other health compromised individuals would not be able to shelter in place successfully unless we were able to go out and meet their basic needs. Without having their basic needs met, they would have to emerge from their shelters and put themselves at risk. And it's a year later, and we've learned a lot about the virus and how we become infected with it and what the dangers are and the consequences. But when this pandemic first started, we didn't know any of that, right? I still remember just not touching anything outside of my house. It's like, I'm going to wash my hand 20 times if it comes anywhere near some object outside my house. So at that time, we were extremely fearful. People were hiding in their homes and their basic needs had to be met. And we launched that home delivery program within a week of the first positive case here in Yolo County, together with our partners. And I have to say, the county and some of the cities were extraordinarily supportive of that effort. They provided all kinds of support services. Our nonprofit partners provided support services. That first week we launched the home delivery program. I think we fed something like 700 individuals around the county, and within a matter of weeks, it was up to over 6,000 individuals, and it was with these incredible community partnerships, whether it was the volunteer drivers, the volunteer box packers. There were, what's the rideshare program in West Sac? I forget what they're called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Via?
They were delivering, these food boxes. There were other companies that had delivery vehicles that, because they weren't able to work, they were providing their vehicles and their drivers. It was just a phenomenal mobilization, similar with the Project Home Key, Room Key, right? That was a very similar type mobilization to meet the needs of unsheltered individuals that were being at that point successfully sheltered in various motel rooms around the county. I mean, our community response to the pandemic, lots of communities can learn from us.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story, because it sounds like it's not just something to share with other counties. It sounds like that's what, I mean, USDA ultimately picked up that program, right? Farm to Families, and food boxes were being delivered across the country. So thanks for sharing all that. Jesse has a question around service. Let's see. So he's following up on Alicia's point that there's duplication of services potentially, and and there's a lot of other groups who are working on food insecurity in the county, right? We just have 4 organizations represented, but how do we, can we brainstorm a little bit? How do we better, coordinate these efforts? What thoughts do you have?
Hi, Jesse. So Jesse runs an out of the box ministries in West Sacramento, and I'll just say, I feel like all of the smaller nonprofits, as we've heard from Michael, they're just as necessary as our big mothership nonprofit. But what I was going to say here is just if we can crack the nut on a system. I know with the homeless population, we have a database where service providers can see what kind of services individuals are receiving, and almost just it helps with the coordination. We know who's talking to them, what they're talking to them about, what direct services they're receiving. I feel like something on food delivery and food services delivery would be beneficial. In the beginning of the pandemic, there was so much community support, coming from individuals, coming from our nonprofits, trying to meet the need. And so there were cases where, a person was receiving a couple of food boxes or multiple hot meals a day. And it was faith-based organizations and just individual volunteers that were trying to do the right thing and make sure their neighbors were being cared for. I think with nonprofits, we're almost there. We have a resources sheet. I've seen it, like, where can you go to a food distribution this week, on what days, where it's going to be. We know that I feel like it's so easy. It's right there. But almost like a database of what organizations are covering what on what days, and almost down to the individual or household level, where we know that this household is being cared for through the school district. This household is, their needs are being met by one of our organizations. And yeah, I think it's there at our fingertips, and we just might need a little bit of shaping to make that happen. But I see that as a way where nonprofits and possibly even individuals or volunteer groups that are self-organized could go and say, like, I know that there's a church group that goes out to the Broderick boat ramp and feeds the homeless every Saturday. that's not something that our organization is doing. So it's a, you know, it's a need. They want to fill a need, and they can figure out where they plug in.
Yeah, that's good to hear that it's almost within reach. That's great. I think we may have run out of time for questions. We do have one question remaining, but I'm going to leave it to Jessica if we need to pivot to the close.
Why don't you take a quick one speaker answer to the last question?
Great. So Anusha's asking a question, you know, still having issues around transportation for families to get to food pickups. And their group has been having a problem with scale. They're not large enough to get their own food pickup. They have too many. So the question: do you have any suggestions around, you know, just how to address, food pickups and how to simplify that or fill that gap?
If it's
a little bit goes to what Alicia was talking about, I think. Yeah.
If it's a central location, I'm wondering, like we do have some box trucks coming to central kind of distributions. I don't know. I'm wondering if there's some kind of solution there where the box truck brings the food boxes out to a somewhat central, but then we would still have the issue of needing them to make it out to individual households if they're not able to get to that location.
Right, the last mile logistics are always difficult. Well, I think we're going to need to end the questions there, and I will turn it over to Jessica. But first, just want to thank the panelists for a really rich and far-ranging conversation. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Thomas. And thank you, all of you, so much for joining us today. Thomas, Michael, Alicia, Kathy, and Christy, thanks for sharing your expertise. And to all of our participants here today, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your tremendous questions, and thank you for your interest in being part of serving our neighbors in need. Our next panel is next Thursday, March 11th from 11 to 12:30, and the topic will be mental health. For more information about the event and the upcoming panels, for the links to register, as well as for recordings of past panels, please go to yolocf.org. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.